preacher going into his arsenal and getting some ammo. Mild-mannered at first, but once he gets his sword, he becomes a warrior for Christ. Get ready, people. It's about to get fired up and turned up.
For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and guidance, so they are without excuse.
Fear God, keep His commandments, folks, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment, with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. It is right to people, be holy, for I'm holy. It is right to people that you must repent and be reconciled unto God. For tomorrow is not a promise for you. The Bible says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. That is, fear God, just as my brother's shirt says there, to fear God and keep His commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. For the Lord shall bring every work in the judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil.
Gang, bitch. Gang
So
shit.
you need
Real
to fear
shit,
God
bro.
and keep His commandments.
Real shit. This nigga speaking facts too. Check that shit out. This the Bible, real shit.
This the Bible.
Yes, sir. This the Bible. You appreciate some real shit, bro. I appreciate it.
Get you one of these.
Stick around, listen.
Get
guys.
you one of these.
Yeah, stick around and listen. I'm listening, bro. The Lord's giving me a message tonight. I'm listening.
To fear God and keep His commandments, folks, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work in the judgment, with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Now I've come out here tonight to speak about 3 individuals, actually 4, but maybe you've heard of them: Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Have any of you heard of Hananiah, Mishael, or Azariah? And perhaps you might know them better as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You see, their true names were not Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but rather this was the designation, or this was the new identity that Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Babylonian Empire, put upon these men. And I want to talk about these men tonight, and I want to talk about faith that will not compromise the truth, folks. Those that stand for truth and will not compromise no matter what the cost. And that is Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now these men, in their original meanings, the name Hananiah means grace and mercy, gift of the Lord. Hananiah, grace and mercy, gift of the Lord. But King Nebuchadnezzar gave him a new identity, and he gave him a new name. And that name became Shadrach, which means command of Aku. And Aku was the moon god. You see, the Babylonian Empire, they looked to astrology. Babylonian Empire was based upon worship of astrology. They worshiped the sun. They worshiped the moon. They worshiped the wandering stars, or what many of you would call planets. And you see, King Nebuchadnezzar, he didn't like the name Hananiah, which meant grace and mercy, the gift of God. So he changed it to Shadrach, which is command of Aku, the moon god. And the name Mishael means who is like God. That was the Hebrew name. Who is like God, Mishael. And King Nebuchadnezzar changed his name to Meshach, which is who is what Aku is. Who is what Aku is. Aku, the moon god. And King Nebuchadnezzar changed the name of Azariah. He gave him a new identity. Azariah was the Hebrew name that meant God helps. Azariah, God helps. Nebuchadnezzar didn't like that name because it glorified the Hebrew God. And he changed his name and gave him a new identity of Abednego, which is servant of Nebo. And Nebo was the Babylonian god of wisdom. You see, these three men, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they had Hebrew names which glorified the God of the Bible, the Hebrew God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But King Nebuchadnezzar, he tried to give them a new identity which glorified his false gods, these astrological gods of the God of wisdom, Nebo, and of Aku, which was the moon god. So many of y'all, you don't remember these names of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, these Hebrew names which glorified the God of the Bible. But I'm going to tell you that their names are known in the heavens. Their name is known by God. And their names are written in heaven as well as His Word. And you see, Nebuchadnezzar tried to give these men a new identity that glorified his false gods. But you know, they didn't receive it. They didn't receive his new identity. And let me explain that to you. And we see here, I'm going to read you a chapter out of Daniel, chapter 3. And it says, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. And he set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. So Nebuchadnezzar made him a big golden statue. And this thing was 60 cubits tall. Now folks, that's 60 cubits tall. And what that equates to is about 100 feet. 100 feet tall. By 6 cubits. So this thing was 100 feet tall by 6 cubits, which is about 10 feet. So 100 feet by 10 feet. This statue that Nebuchadnezzar erected was about the size of this statue here in the U.S. of Semiramis, folks.
Statue of Liberty.
And you know the statue of Semiramis, or rather the Statue of Liberty. You notice the big sun, the solar rays that are coming out of her head there. That's another Babylonian sun goddess. But it says here that Nebuchadnezzar the king sent together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. You know, he took great pride in his statue. Then the princes, the governors and captains, the judges, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before that image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up." Folks, I want you to pay attention. I want you to pay attention, because the same thing that was going on back during the Babylonian Empire is going on in the United States of America today. And what is happening, but the beast system that we live in is setting up an image, and they expect you to bow to the system. They expect you to bow down to them. And whoso falleth not down to worship it shall the same hour be cast in the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Thereof at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. And they spake and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship that golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast in the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the provinces of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up." Boy, if that don't sound familiar. You know, there's men in the world today that are taking a stand and a stance for righteousness. And when the government rises up and they say, you're not to go to church, you're not to attend services, you're not to gather together, there's a group of individuals that say, "No, we will not listen to you, O king. For our God says not to forsake the assembling together with brethren, and all the more as we see the day approaching." There's a group of individuals that refuse to bow to the beast system. We refuse to bow before that golden idol. And we say, "No, O king, we will not bow." And you see what happened was there was a group of Chaldeans. A group of Chaldeans that came to the king, and they routed out these men that would not bow down to that statue, that golden idol. Just like there's many today that are turning against the church, turning against the Christians, turning against the men of God who will not bow down before the system. They come up and they turn against you because you're not wearing a mask. They make you out to be an enemy because you refuse to wear a mask, because you refuse to bow down to the system. And then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, "It is true. Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up?" The king wanted to know, is it true? Are you refusing to serve the gods which I have set up? Now if ye be ready that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. But if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? The king is giving them an ultimatum. He says, is it true that you won't bow down to my gods? Well, I'm giving you the opportunity that when you hear this music played, that at that hour you bow down and worship before my God. But if not, you're going to be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And he says, who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? See how prideful King Nebuchadnezzar was. He wanted to know, who is that God that will deliver you out of my hands? I'm so powerful. I'm the Almighty. I'm majestic. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if God decides not to save us, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. You see, these men, they stood for the truth. They stood for the truth, and they did not compromise. They refused to compromise and bow a knee before the idol set up by the government system. They refused to bow and worship those false gods. And then was Nebuchadnezzar, he was full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat that furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. And then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Folks, that oven was stoked so hot, 7 times hotter than normal, that when these men come and see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and threw them into the furnace, that the men that threw them in there were consumed by the fire. They burnt, they died, they perished because of the flames. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? And they answered and said unto the king, True, O king. And he answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. There's that 4th man in the fire, folks. He threw in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or rather Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, because they refused to compromise. They refused to be identified with these false gods. And they held on to that identity of serving the true living God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And when they refused to bow down to these false gods, they were thrown into the fire. And the 4th man was in the fire with them. And that King Nebuchadnezzar said that 4th man was like the Son of God. For truly Jesus was there in the midst of that fire with these 3 men. And then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire, and the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered up together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was a hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Folks, these men didn't even smell like smoke. Not a hair on their head was singed. And then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who had sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god, except their own God. And therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. A man of God will not compromise the truth. A man of God who fears God and he keeps the commandments of the living God. No matter what the cost, the man of God will not compromise the truth. And that's why we come out here to speak and to preach to you the truth tonight, folks. We will not compromise the truth. The Bible says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. Folks, we love our neighbors. That's why we come out here to preach the truth unto you tonight, folks. We come out here to reveal the truth. And who is the truth, or what is the truth? Who is the truth? Jesus said in John 14:6 that I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. That is, Jesus Christ is the truth, folks. And he says, you will be judged by the words that he speaks. You'll be judged by those words on the day of judgment, folks.
Well, the prophet Daniel tells about 3 men who walked with God. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, before the wicked king they tried. And the king commanded them bound and thrown into the fiery furnace that day. With the fire so hot the men were slain that forced them on their way. They wouldn't bend. They held on to the will of God, so we are told. They wouldn't bow. They wouldn't bow their knees to the idol made of gold. They wouldn't burn. They were protected by the 4th man in the fire. They wouldn't bend. They wouldn't bow. They wouldn't burn. When the 3 were cast in, the king rose up to witness his awful fate. He began to tremble at what he saw, in astonished tones he spake. Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? Below I see 4 men under, unbound and walking there. There's Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, in the fiery coals they try. And the form of the 4th man that I see is like the Son of God. They wouldn't bend. They held on to the will of God, so we are told. They wouldn't bow. They wouldn't bow their knees to the idol made of gold. They wouldn't burn. They were protected by the 4th man in the fire. They wouldn't bend. They wouldn't bow. They wouldn't burn. They wouldn't bend. They wouldn't bow. They wouldn't burn.
Look at all this long gray hair on here. That must be yours.